Welcome to this episode of Level with Emily, featuring a conversation with composer Oleksa Lozowchuk about his music for Horizon Forbidden West DLC called Burning Shores. The music is largely orchestral, although, if you know the Horizon games, technology is a very important part of that story. So there's synth elements too, of course. Two singers, Melissa Kaplan and Julie Elvin, represent the main characters in the game. And so we talk about them and Oleksa's work with them. And cellist Blair Lofgren, who is often a part of Oleksa's music. You hear cello a lot throughout this score, which is great, in addition to some other really cool instruments that we talk about. We also talk about Oleksa's compositional process and how he works through projects like this musically. Keep checking us out here on YouTube. We're kind of close to monetization, which would be helpful for us in some way, shape, or form. So if you could subscribe here and, thumbs up us and like us and all those terms, that'd be amazing. And come join the conversation on Discord. That link is down in the show notes. And if you can support us financially on Patreon, that'd be amazing. Find us at patreon.com/level. Before I give you to Oleksa, just a brief reminder that because of copyright and monetization, we don't put music in these videos. So keep that in mind. You got to listen to the audio podcast for that, which I highly recommend. All right, now here's Oleksa.
It's called Burning Shores. Takes place in kind of a LA that's falling apart, I guess is one way of describing it. I don't want to dive too much into the actual kind of the backstory and lore, just because I don't want to not do justice to the storylines and everything going on. But from a compositional point of view, is basically there's a new character who Aloy is has to do missions with and interacting. There's obviously challenges. There's bigger, crazier creatures that they have to kind of engage with. And for me, it was just kind of extending what we did in the mainline game, but giving it a little bit of a unique twist, a bit more epic, I guess, is one way to describe it, in terms of, some of the battle music was more grand, I guess, and scale-wise just felt different because of the nature of some of the battles that took place, at least for my keys that I did. And then melodically wanted to be something that could kind of and harmonically be something where it felt like it dovetailed nicely with the main line, but it felt like it was a part two, or kind of like a side journey, but that still had a lot of depth and a lot of heart and emotion to it. So even from like the main, what people have called the Burning Shores theme, to the Burning Shores, which is what I wrote originally as a piece called something about Hollywood, but it was basically, they wanted me to write music for the Hollywood setting. And it had kind of it was the second half of that piece. And then when we ended up I did, I think, 3 trailers, 2 or 3 trailers. And it was like, the dev team just keeps listening to this, and this is the hook that they really like. And so I ended up kind of, when it came time to do the trailers, kind of rebuilt it out of this section that the dev team kind of felt was, no, that's the hook. We keep on feeling like very simple, but also it kind of has this longing to it. It has this, there's still that emotional hook for Aloy, right? In terms of the journey that she was on and where she needs to go. So that, in a nutshell, for me, it was just continuing what we had started with the first one, but just almost extending that. If the depth was this much, kind of like going a bit more like this, and then a bit more breadth to it,
Yeah, definitely. And of course, you mentioned the other character, which is why there are 2 female voices, correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a huge part of this. So, let's go ahead and talk about those 2 women right now, Julie Elvin and Melissa Kaplan. Melissa Kaplan, of course, I've been a fangirl of since Jesper Kid's Assassin's Creed. I mean, she's the voice of that, and there's just this purity, this almost like that English choral tradition quality that I hear in her voice. It's just so, little to no vibrato and just pure, right? It's just this tone. I absolutely love it. And of course, Julie's voice is absolutely gorgeous too. So talk to me about working with them and, integrating that into the score so heavily.
Well, I love working with both of them. They're awesome in their own way. I had worked with Melissa for many years on different projects. When I was at Capcom working on Dead Rising stuff, we did like The Coldest Time of Year, which was like and she's great. She's such a versatile singer in so many styles. She can do crazy vibrato as well, but I find her voice, there's a purity, like you mentioned, there's a purity in her voice which really cuts through in mixes. Like, forget about the arrangements and the songs. Like, in mixes, she's just so easy to work with because her voice just soars, right? In a unique way. It's kind of like, it has like, even if she's like pushing notes very strong, they're still very focused, right? Like, you think of high frequencies, the higher you go, the more focused they are, and you can kind of pinpoint where they are. It's the same thing with her voice. It's a very peculiar voice, and it's very like, when you hear it, it can just like cut through a mix and cut through to get to you right away. So I ended up using her there was a Horus type beast, I guess. I don't even know what you call it, but it's basically an enemy that you battle in a game, which is still kind of larger than life and beautiful, but also still kind of like a challenging enemy that you have to overcome. And we just needed something that had more of an epic feel to it. And they had referenced, some of the Dune soundtrack and some of the other things, trying to find tracks that are like, how can we have something that's kind of soars and feels larger than life, but it still doesn't feel totally disconnected from the sound we were building with Horizon. And so, although Melissa worked on the mainline game, kind of being the voice of, can't remember the official name of her sister. Do you remember the name of this? Aloy's sister, half sister, or whatever you call it. I don't. Maybe it was Echo or Beta. I think that's what it was, Beta. And so she represented her voice in the mainline game. And when it came time to do these tracks, I was like, the kind of music that required, Julie's voice didn't really fit because she's got more of a lower a very rich alto voice, and her falsetto is great, but it requires not a lot of density underneath. It has to have kind of room for her voice to kind of float, and it becomes the primary thing that you focus on. Whereas Melissa's, I was like, I knew I could have a dense mix of this crazy battle with lots of space, and her voice would just like razor sharp, just be like, like F-35 flying through the air, and it just cuts right through everything, right? So I don't, canon wise, it probably is a little confusing to have Melissa's voice on it from if you're really deep cuts nerding out, but it was more just like I consider them just like part of the palette, the Horizon palette that you can draw on and use and stuff. And so whereas Julie's role on this one was really about the personal story on Aloy and her kind of romantic interest as well, and the conveying Aloy's inner world, and really taking the time to even for Julie, actually writing this piece for her was very interesting. There was a cue called The Idea of Home. It was really about trying to peel back all the different layers that Aloy would be feeling in terms of all the emotions she was going through, particularly as a stoic character who had never really expressed her emotions in such a way at all. That process in itself is it requires a lot of nuance, a lot of delicacy, and so even working with Julie, it was like exploring, like, okay, well, what are the different timbres that not just melodically or harmonically, but even texturally, like, what are the different timbres that can come out to convey all this range of emotions and nuance that we need to convey, and stuff. And then for to the Burning Shores, of course, we use Julie's voice kind of being the, the voice of Aloy as she's, soars above Hollywood and kind of repeats that leitmotif over and over again and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's awesome working with like those female singers. They're just super easy to work with. They love having a challenge, which is also amazing. Like with Melissa, I'm like, can I push her high, like coloratura even higher and higher and higher? And with Julie, it's funny. We spend time because she also does therapy, like I think it's voice therapy or other things. She helps different clients.
Okay.
Not aside from her singing career. And so with her, we're breaking down phonemes and we're breaking down like actual like, this syllable and how it rolls off the tongue and the timing of things. So it's very interesting how I try to tailor the writing to what they are interested in, and I'll try to bring out the best out of them. Instead of just writing lines and being, okay, play this melody. It's like, okay, no, I'm going to write it for you because you're the instrument, and that's what needs to come out.
Yeah, I mean, you said a bunch of things there that I kind of have notes about in various ways. There is a battle track on Burning Shores called Steel Snare. I assume it's a battle track, and this is Melissa singing. And is this the combat track you were talking about just then?
Yeah,
about how dense it is? Yeah, it's amazing.
Let me one sec. I got yeah. Yeah, I mean that's a battle track, and that is there's multiple stages for this Horus kind of creature in the game.
Okay.
And one of the phases of the battle is, I believe that's what it was used for, it's actually that one, now that I think of it, I think that is the ending. Yeah, that's the very last one. That's the very last battle when you're fighting the Horus. So you've done two sections of the battle beforehand, and then it's kind of the culmination of it. We changed the order of it on the soundtrack just because it felt like the flow made more sense and stuff.
Sure.
But
But
there's an example of a super dense arrangement with a lot of like, I call it like Marco Polo, but it's basically you have a melody and then you have a counter melody and then you have a new version of the melody with something else. And somewhere in between there, she needs to cut through the mix and kind of like still be like, hey, I'm here. Right. And so again, you hear, I always know that I can, she has I can't remember how many octave range, but it's still like it's usable notes. Sometimes you have a range, it's maybe an octave, maybe a bit more than an octave, but like with Melissa, I'm able to actually like have a 2 octave range sometimes of a melody that can still be like you can make sense of it on a laptop or your phone or on a full range speaker system. So this was the steel snare was an example where I could, she could start off being da, da, and then she can just go up from there as high as I want, basically, right? So
wow. Yeah, I loved that track, and the thing that I loved about it is it's not just that there are different layers, but the intensity of the layers. I just liked the variety in the intensity, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's like you're mixing it up, but it's still maintaining this level of, not panic, but intensity,
Yeah, I mean, because it was the final stage of the battle fighting this Horus creature. So there's a lot of, like in the actual gameplay, there was a lot of foreground, background movement, right? Like ranged kind of like shooting that Aloy had to do from a distance. This beast is giant. And so there's a lot of tumbling, jumping around, shooting, that kind of stuff where, I try to structure those in terms of musically. I try to structure those in terms of like, there's something new every 4 bars or 8 bars or 10 bars. And that includes variation on devices that you use to create intensity or to contrast it, right? So
sure.
So sometimes it's going from like a that kind of like a frantic feel, whether that's with strings or with sound effects or whatever, or percussion, to other stuff which is more like this big arching legato lines of da 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 da. It's like it's just expanding, right? So the intensity is not there necessarily with like battle percussion and stuff like that going on, but you're creating an expectation of tension and release, or this I can do this, like Aloy can do this, she can beat this beast, and you do that by playing tag, right?
Sure.
You basically just play tag and kind of melodies of hope, and then chaos and frantic, feelings, and then melodies of hope or harmonies of hope, and you kind of just go back. You play ping pong back and forth between those, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Um, so, we've talked about the singers, Julie and Melissa, and I'm sure they'll come up again. But we've got to talk about Blair, because I hear a lot of cello, and I assume that is Blair Lofgren, who is brother-in-law to you, but also musical muse in some ways. So
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, Blair was all over Horizon Forbidden West. Obviously, we've worked together for the last 20 years, so it's really just an excuse. Any of these games or films that we work on, it's just an excuse to hang out. And it's funny because when we work on stuff, he's not a gamer. He likes games, but he's not a huge gamer. But he loves. Yeah. He's like, well, what are we working on today, or what's the backstory today? And so I'm like trying to like set the story up and set the context up. Which is very interesting, because at the end of the day, he's a conduit for emotion, that we're trying to kind of mirror back to the player as they're playing the game. But ultimately, he's also the first audience in terms of like reading the material for the first time, understanding like pretty quickly like whether or not something's going to resonate emotionally, right? Because the player that's literally what they have to do. They have to resonate emotionally to whatever you're giving them. So the process is usually a combination of a couple of things. It's usually like he loves the melodies of the parts that I give him to play. Or if it's like we want to do more intense stuff, it's like, okay, well, today we're doing like death metal band on a drop C string, and a bunch of chug kind of stuff. And then other times it's like on, I think it was Titan's Wake. Yeah, on Titan's Wake, it was so cool. At the beginning of it, the track, it was it's basically, I was like, okay, Blair, I want you to hold this note, just this drop D or whatever the key was. And I want you to basically, I'm going to conduct you in real time. You're going to be like a filter. You're going to open up the shape and the texture and go closer to the bridge, and basically morph texture back and forth. And we're just going to create a bed of texture, and we're going to track you and stack you and split you over a couple of octaves and just build that up. And I would take care of it in post-production after. So that would be an example of like, I would just say, you're fighting this beast. This is the first stage of the battle, but it's like the focus is on, we want major depth of field. You're in the middle of a canyon. There's this beast far away, and scale is everything. So we're just going to explore scale by virtue of the texture that you give me, going louder and softer. And I'm going to conduct. I'm going to open you up. And literally, like, if you go back to the original recording, I think we did it on the first take because he had to go take care of his daughter or something, but it was the perfect take.
Wow.
And we just recorded it, created a bed, and probably the first 2 minutes of the track literally were untouched. They just became the rock bed, I guess, which I built everything else on top. Melissa adding her voice, all the other parts on top of it. But that initial, like, something's breathing and it has space, just came from working with Blair, of like performing literally a single note and just kind of breathing, making it larger. So imagine we didn't have a score. I mean, we had a score, but for that one note, you just imagine a whole performance of a bunch of hairpins conducting texture, moving and stuff. So that kind of stuff is interesting because you would not get that with even if I were to record that with like a professional overdub, cellist, or if we were in London, we were recording something on stage, you just don't get that kind of texture because you're under the constraints of budget, time, lots of minutes of stuff to go through. So you don't have time to really experiment with a lot of that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And our ability to do that in one take comes down to the couple of decades of working together. Like we have a shorthand. I don't even have to say anything. I just make a
Right.
gesture, do something, and we know. So, so that would be the bonus of having that history.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You kind of did some of that with him, I feel like, in the title track, right in the beginning. It sounds like it could potentially be cello just really far away with kind of a thinner texture on it. Can you confirm or deny? Yep.
So that actually, so at the very beginning, playing the melody, that's actually that is actually Drew Dureka, who's also a good friend and colleague who played on Horizon Forbidden West. He actually he does the string arrangements for who's that French popular singer? He's like a Grammy Award winning guy. He's amazing, but he performed that on Hardanger.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. Yeah. That makes a lot more sense. Okay.
Yeah. So that wasn't. But that was interesting in the sense that because you have to tune the resonant strings for the Hardanger finger. Yeah. And that was one of the cases where, I think originally when I did the trailer, it originally I think Ayla was flying, and originally I had it was just nylon guitar that had played that same melody, because you hear it in. I think it was for his amusement. Yeah, for his amusement. Yeah. So, and for his amusement, about half, there's two parts to that track, and the second half is kind of like the building blocks of what went into the Burning Shores. But when it came time for the soundtrack, and I was trying to give a compilation to Lucas at Gorilla for the soundtrack, I was like, this is kind of the main theme for Burning Shores, and it felt like it just needed longing for home or longing for something right off the top. And so I ended up basically taking an outtake that Drew and I did with Hardanger and other stuff, and I kind of built an intro to the rest of the piece after. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, love that.
And it's one of those things where you're like, when you're listening to it all and you hear the whole piece, and you just realize you need to get people's the hair on the back of their neck, or like you need to have that visceral frisson moment right away. You don't want to wait too long, and it felt like that was the quickest way, because you have the timbre from the Hardanger, which is kind of like old world feeling. Yep. And it has a longing, plaintive kind of melody, and it felt like the combo of that with some of the synth pads and stuff going on, it just felt like a good combo right off the top.
Absolutely. And you mentioned for his amusement, again, just loved this track. And a lot of cello in there too. Is he just overdubbing? Is that when there's like two cello lines playing? Is that him?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to remember.
Is it like 3 minutes?
Yeah, at the 3 minute mark, you're saying?
Ish, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he was just tracking himself. I wrote multiple parts, but basically got him to do it. That one, again, was more of like, because it's a canon, it's a motif that repeats and builds and builds.
Yes.
It felt like it was the right thing. I could have arranged it for traditional string octet or whatnot, but I find when you start getting arrangements that are quite dense with modern production, that a lot of the voicing that you have in string quintets, quartets, octets, they work great for like a rich, balanced sound, but they don't work great for cutting through as like a soaring motif on top of a bed of other production elements. Okay. And it felt like having multiple cellos it'd be kind of like, if I had a viola da gamba, a cello, and something else, they're close in terms of the family, in terms of the range of the sonority that comes out of it. But they all are kind of like, it's like having a trio of soloists basically that are getting to interweave, whereas when it's in a quartet or quintet or octet, it's more about like the homogeneous sound together that they make.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I just loved that when he would do those duets. I just really, really loved that. And then also in that track, for his amusement, this low flute that keeps coming in and stuff. So tell me about that, because it's in more than just that track.
That is Gareth McLaren. So he was the flautist on Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West. And he's one of the best in the world. I think he was the flautist on Lion King, and like he's kind of like he's first call flautist.
Gotcha.
He plays every kind of flute known to man. He even has one E flat flute, but there's only a handful in the world and stuff. Again, another one of those people who are like, you can give him a score, you can hum a melody, you can change things on the spot, and even improv, and he's just awesome. He's just like gives it right back to you, but makes it just really beautiful. Can take a single note and make it mean something, right?
Yeah. I mean, the tone is beautiful.
And what we do often with those is when we record sessions, I'll have him have say all 5 flutes, like contrabass flute, bass flute, alto flute, or tenor flute, or
there's alto flute.
Concert flute, and even a gold one, and then the E flat one, which is is great for like more like not penny whistle style, but like it has a particular character for it. And what we'll do sometimes is I'll track. I'll have my assistant Juliet basically prep all the scores, because they have different, they read differently, and we'll record different sections of them. And then when it comes time for me to do my post-production, or heading towards final edit and comp and mix, there's just sometimes when you frame up everything, you're like hearing the same tonality all the way through doesn't work, and it might just be like a single note that I'll use from like the contrabass flute or something. Or cool. Sometimes I'll get him to be like, hey, can you just play the contrabass part that's in the low strings? Can you just do that, but do it on the contrabass flute? And I'll double it, and then it kind of adds another dimension to low strings where you wouldn't have it. But it's basically they're playing the same part, they're doubling, but it just makes it very interesting, because you have Gareth, his ability to change the tonality and with his embouchure and his mastery. Like I said, it just brings a whole different dimension to what you can have come out of his mouth.
Okay. Yeah. Loved it. And then, of course, one of the, I guess, defining characteristics of the world of Horizon is this kind of, old modern, but with new and all. So there's this juxtaposition of, spears and bows and arrows, but then there's technology. So, those are, I think that change is reflected with synth pads and stuff like that. So, talk about when you choose to put that in, or at what stage are you working with synths then?
I mean, who doesn't love Blade Runner, right? I guess I'll just put that out there. But I would say, I think what people love about, say, Blade Runner, those kind of soundtracks or things that incorporate instruments that make that kind of sound, is the expression and how musically expressive they are as analogs to the real instruments, right? So synths, for me, on Horizon Forbidden West and on Burning Shores, they pretty much are, there's the juxtaposition for sure between like kind of like, the digital kind of a digitalized or virtualized version of organic matter. There's that dimension for sure, and that often was explored with oscillators, synths, arpeggiators, that kind of stuff. Just kind of bring it back to the kind of the robot world, AI, computers, basically artificial intelligence, all that kind of stuff. That's what represented that world, and also a lot of the devices that Aloy had that she could use in the world, right? But then on top of that, and I would say in some ways more important to me, was that I chose patches that could have expression so that it was like, if it was like, I would hold like I'd have like a Vangelis kind of pad, or a synth, a lead, and I would be like, and I could like literally shape it with the aftertouch and
Okay.
basically treat it like an actual organic instrument, right? Where
Yeah.
there's expression. You know, I find those things, they're great ear candy. People love the ear candy, but
Yeah.
they're also I don't know, they're just an interesting thing because they feel like you're trying to just you're breathing life into something that is doesn't have innate like or like any kind of breath in it or any kind of inherent
Yeah.
life in it, but it has the potential. It's just like pregnant with potential. It has this ability to like surprise you, give you randomness, and then you kind of shape those mistakes, or you shape the chaos as it's coming out, right? And you make it
Yeah.
musical, and then you curate that, right? Like most of the time what people hear on especially modern soundtracks is if there's anything that's been kind of performed to be expressive with those synths, there's probably 40 or 100x more material that you've never heard because it takes so much trial and error to find
Sure.
those. But then when you find that one thing that's like 20 seconds of gold or 5 seconds of gold, you can't reproduce it again. It's very difficult to reproduce, but you end up building kind of scaffolding around it, musical scaffolding around it, because that becomes a signature piece for it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of role that when I was producing this stuff, I was always like, okay, find those sounds that were musically expressive, try to like take some of the main melodies, break them down into something like if you had a melody like da 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 da, you have a repeating note, on a string instrument, repeating notes, you can change your bow. On a synth that has just the on off, it doesn't sound really musical to go da 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 da, right?
Right.
So you kind of simplify parts or figure out where maybe it's like the last note da 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 da, and then the synth comes in on and gives you the shape that
Yeah.
you want. Um, yeah, so it's really more like I think the synths worked as like salt and pepper. They just added the seasoning um,
Yeah.
where it needed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Above and below, another, of course, great track with another, to me, mystery instrument at the beginning right away, like 26 seconds in or so. So
Okay,
you got to
I
tell
gotta.
me. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Guess what do you think it is?
I mean, it sounds like some kind of pipes, right? Like you're playing it like it's like some kind of bagpipe, but it's not. I mean,
Right.
I don't know.
Okay, so first of all, I loved working this track. I
It's a great
remember,
one.
I remember, I was in Palm Springs at the time because I had some meetings in LA. I was relaxing, or I was working. My wife was relaxing at the time. We were staying at a friend's place. I literally had the laptop that I'm on right now. I got footage from Gorilla of this Sunwing battle, and they were like, "Okay, well, we need music. There's this Sunwing that you're flying, and you fly through the air. There's stuff happening at a distance, and you get to dive into the water and fly out, and then you get to dive into the water and fly out, and it's this battle of going in and out of the
Awesome.
water and
Yeah.
whatnot." And that the basically the most of the structure of that piece was I recorded in one take. Most of the stuff I usually like to do is like I put up the video, I don't watch it, I press record, and whatever comes out. So like I was watching it, and maybe it was the second take because I took it in for a while, but I just got a feel for it after a while. I was like, this feels like a tuplet piece. Like there's like so I think I literally had like and I built the whole piece and the tempo after that. And then that section, I was like, okay, okay, if we keep on going with this, I'm like, so anyways, that is my voice.
Oh, it is.
So it is my voice, and all I did went through it. So it's kind of like I don't want to say a jig, but it's kind of like which is rare also for Horizon because they don't usually have like those template kind of pieces. They're kind of more straight. But I was like, Lucas and Gorilla has all been very good to me as they've gotten to know me because they just start trusting my instincts.
Yeah.
And my instincts on this was just like, no, this is like, I feel a lot closer to how to fly a pet dragon than, than just traditional Aloy stuff. And I'm like, she's on a Sunwing diving into the water near the hills of Hollywood. Like, this is kick ass. Like, there's got to be a lot more to this. This felt a lot closer to like a God of War feel or like some other games that are more fantasy like. So I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go with it and do it. So my voice, basically, I laid the framework for the piece down, built the structure for it, recorded all the parts, and then I was like, I still need something robotic, something to bring back the world of like the facsimile or the digital side. And so I just recorded my voice doing it, and then I ended up processing it kind of like through there's a plugin called, I think, Little Alter Boy or something. You can constrict like things you can change the formant and the pitch, and you can change it so that it's almost like a robot, and it ends up constricting it so it's very it's kind of like auto-tune but not auto-tune. But then because I performed it, I could add lilt into it and have like stressors and things that go, and then you add effects on it and kind of couch in the mix and add other parts, and it kind of works. So
amazing. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love that. And I also love the fact, having it be a compound meter like that with the triplets, like you're so much music about water is, right? And flying too. Yeah. Absolutely. So it like totally it just had to be. Yeah, that's perfect.
The other thing too was I was playing with dun 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 and dun 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 at the same time in this push and pull. But honestly, the genesis of that piece was watching the video and feeling the cadence of when she dove in the water.
Sure.
And so the melodies, like literally the first time I just started writing and things came out, it was because that was the natural cadence of like, yep, the melody's going to flourish about here. And it came out, and I didn't change a whole lot. I just curated what I wrote, but I was actually responding to like, if I was flying and I was playing this game right now, this is what I would want to feel. And this is where the melody would crest, right? And this is when it would dive back down into the other thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that was really born out of the gameplay itself, and kind of the perspective of the camera of the game. Yeah. Because, and I would say that line at 26 seconds, I would not come up with that line if I was writing a line on a piece of paper on a score or at a piano or somewhere else. That was really born out of like feeling it. Like a lot of folk music is very much you feel it, right? You push and pull, your accents, where you're going, the grace notes that you have, all that kind of stuff is really about feel. And you just I would not get that just by trying to mimic it on a patch on a keyboard and stuff. So
yeah.
The other thing too is when you sing it, it forces you to take breaths.
Oh yeah.
Right? So musicians have to breathe, right?
Wind players, yes.
Wind players, but also if you think about like even conductors and like pieces of music in general, you're always thinking of shape of like phrases and when to like tension release. And so that is one advantage of if you always come back to, hey, you got to be able to hum your melodies, you got to be able to sing your melodies. Yes. You'll always be forced to like make it human and kind of, okay, our mom sang to us in the womb. There was a certain amount, like a melody lasts about this long for a melody, right?
Yeah, yep.
And it's just with using the physical limitations that kind of informed the language that we got used to hearing. So I kind of view melody the same way too. It's like, it should be something that, regardless of the harmonic underpinning or everything else that you do underneath it, you should just be able to hum it or whistle it or sing it, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Someone I once knew, this is really great, and also kind of has some really great transitions and changes in it. But it starts in this really dreamlike, almost almost lazy way, you know, it's just very kind of slides around. And I loved that kind of ambiguity to it all. So, and just, I mean, there are other things I'll mention, but go ahead and talk to me a little bit about how it starts in that way.
This is from a cinematic. I can't remember the name of the character, but he's kind of a creepy dude. Kind of,
yeah.
I don't even know. Like, think of somebody who abuses people and just kind of like a slithery character.
Yeah.
So that shiftiness was on purpose because it's like, the ambiguity was more of like, this was a contrast in a scene where there was a female character who was kind of trapped by him in a situation, and the dialogue that she was, her reactions were basically almost like, when you have if there's a child who's in a situation where they're uncomfortable but they don't know how to actually express themselves under duress, and everybody else knows as a watcher what's going on. Something's just not right. This is not good. That's what I was trying to convey at the beginning of this piece, was this, slithery dude. And just, you can't really trust him, ultimately. And then, I don't know if you heard it, there's bandoneon in there actually as well. So it's interesting. Right at around the 13-second mark, there's this kind of, and it's the band. Drew plays bandoneon and some bass clarinet and other stuff, and so I got him to just hold certain trace notes, and he did this like pulsing vibrato thing on it with a held note, which was great, which mirrored that synth, the Vangelis kind of pulsing stuff too. And I tried to marry those both so that you had the synthetic sound, but you also had an organic generative instrument that did that. And then that piece, basically, as it builds, you can keep on hearing it after. So you did hear mandolin. You were right about about the 1 minute mark. I start bringing in mandolin, and it's starting to basically get this pulse, because basically we have the creepy start to this. We have the creepy start to the cinematic.
Yeah.
And then you can see the wheel starting to turn in the character's head of like, what's he going to do? How is he going to figure things out? And so the mandolin, I started to have this pulse, which is basically a tight cluster of notes that were dissonant with each other. But they were kind of just this pulsing, like things he's ticking away, like how is he going to take advantage of the situation and build. At the same time, Aloy, and I believe Seika was in that scene as well, they're also devising, how are we going to help this girl under duress and basically take care of the situation. And then it crests basically at the point where they take action, which was at the right around minute 30, minute 26 or something. You can be like, Aloy and Seika are like, we got to take action. You're out of here and stuff. So
yeah, loved that one. We talked about Titan's Wake for a half a second earlier, but there is this one part, I think, and I thought about bringing this up, but we were talking about Blair, and I wanted to keep talking about Blair. So so there's this part right around 120 where you do this, she's ascending, and she goes up to the 7, and you kind of like have her hang out on the 7 just a little bit extra long. And so it creates this really great dissonance. And I loved it. It's like a suspension that in the Baroque era you would have gotten thrown out of school for, kind of thing. But it was just absolutely lovely, because you can tell there's multiple, she's being molted, right? So there's more of her in there. And some of her does go all the way up to tonic, but this other, I just love every single time I heard that. I would be like, oop, make a note of that. Oh, I already did. Oh, make a note of that. Oh, I already did. It was like that kind of thing. So I just want
to hear it just to remind me. So the one thing that I think people underestimate, I think a lot of composers and artists underestimate the power of, call it an eson, like a tonic, like the notion that you have a root, a plumb line. People do this all the time. you have some device in your house that is running, it has a motor or is on electrical, and you have a hum that's at a bass note, and then you have a melodic line that you kind of just hum and sing along, and you can kind of like pivot right close to it, and it's dissonant. You can go right above it and then become consonant. And
Yeah.
one thing that in this case, the reason that it works really well is a couple of things. One is Melissa's got a super pure voice, so when she hits a note, even if she's rubbing for a certain period of time and then moves up, you still have the decay off these. Like, I think that was a 10-second delay. I think like a reverb. Like you have a lot of space on this, so there's a lot of like a lot of the there were multiple parts in there, but in addition to that, you also have the natural decay of like in the country of Georgia where they would sing in the mountains with like a 10 or 15-second reverberant time. You could basically kind of harmonize to your own your original notes. And it's the same thing in this case, which I think added to the feeling of it being more larger than life and more epic in kind of because you literally are projecting those clusters of notes, including the tonic and whatever else, are going out, and then you're able to kind of surf and bend up, bend down, but you still have that plump. It's kind of like if you have a stable fifth, right? If you have whatever any fifth, a tonic and fifth above, doesn't matter what you do up top, you got the stability of the fifth on the bottom the whole time. Take away the fifth and it's just the tonic. In my ear, it just feels more like there's still stability there, but it just means that now what was super stable over a couple of octaves with and the overtones of the fifth is now collapsed to the tonic. So you just have this bass line of a really kind of like their motor that's humming. And then now that opens up all the frequency spectrum from that tonic upwards for you to explore microtones, whole tones, half tones, like whatever you want. There's a lot of space in between notes. So even like a second is way wider than it would be if you had the fifth there, because the way that you hear it, there's just a lot more room. Even like say Melissa went from if she came back down to there's like you can almost go down slightly sharper than you were before, and there's still room for it to sit okay, So anyways, so there's that one bit, which is like the notion of space that you get from the kind of spaces that you place your sound within to project. But then on top of that is when you have when you have I don't know, say you did a song and you had a verse, chorus, verse. If you just stayed on the tonic the whole time but changed your chords on top, the over 2-3 minutes, and you just held the tonic all the way through, but changed all the inner voicing and the chords on top, you are building so much tension the whole time that when you release it, it's just glorious, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you like the chord or you don't like the chord. You just really feel a real sense of release and stuff. Whereas when you're shifting stuff all the time, you don't have, you don't get that same sense of like expectation that you've built up, and you can't really capitalize off of landing,
Yeah, exactly.
And I would say those kind of cues this was the one that I mentioned with Blair holding that note all the way through. Right. So we had the space because he was holding one single note, the tonic,
just
the
tonic
time,
right.
Okay.
Cool.
But it works for whatever reason, because I can stack I could have even gone way more dissonant with like the chording on top, and it still would have worked at the end of the day, because it comes full circle to the tonic at the end.
Right.
Basically. So.
Right. Yeah. No, loved that track. The idea, we'll come back to Ruins Rise in a minute. But the idea of home, this is about as warm as it gets, the sound from this. And I remember you've talked before about how and I don't know if you still do this or not, but having a visualizer to see on the color spectrum the music.
Oh yeah, this is mother's womb blue, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to me about this. It's absolutely beautiful. The flute, the vocal duet, Blair, the guitar. It's just gorgeous track.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you. How do I express this? I mean, it was a delicate scene, first of all. So not just the content of the scene, but the actual, like, literally the actors, when they were like Seika's actor and Aloy's actor, when it was like they were like whispering, like it was like very quiet. So I had to literally record and play everything very delicately and still find range within that, right? It's kind of like, imagine the only dynamic range you have is triple pianissimo and double pianissimo. And within that, you have to create a lot of range for where you can go.
Yeah.
Of course, at one point you get to go to mezzo forte at one point, but pretty much you stay there the whole time.
Yeah.
So my it was a very similar thing. Like, I put up the scene, I drop tune the guitar to some open tuning so that I could basically, and I performed and sang it the first take, basically same thing. Wow. It just came out naturally, which I find usually is the most. I do have to tweak it, but usually I find that is the most immediate emotional response to a scene like that, is just to feel where things are going. And it also, because I'm literally in lockstep with what the actors are saying on screen, and I'm looking at the movement on scene, the mise en scène, camera angle, and so I can respond dynamically to what they are saying and how they act in real time, which is really important for a scene like this, because it's like 4 minutes long, right? It has a couple of endings and alt endings, because there's choice involved based on the player and what they want to do. But if I were to take this scene and score it in sections, like I'm going to do the first 20 seconds, and then I'm going to go until I'm happy, and then I'm going to score the next section. You don't get, I don't know if I use the right term, but like, you don't get to live through that as one continuous experience.
Yes.
And there is something to be said, like when you're a gamer and you play it for the first time, or you're watching a scene for the first time, you only get to live that lived experience once, like that like portion of time once. And so I really I try to protect that as much as I can the first time I engage with it. And then also, like, I find that it sets the guardrails for how wide I can take my dynamic range, how, like, even like going from like da 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 da, even knowing, like, okay, I'm going to change it from a da da to a da 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 da. Instead, it depends on the pitch center of Aloy's voice and Seika's voice when they're talking.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Competing frequencies, right?
Competing frequencies, but also like they're saying stuff really quiet, and they're very emotional, and they're like, I felt this way. And it's like, it's literally right in the range of like the low flute and the cello and other stuff. So I have to basically contour melodies. So it'd be kind of like if you take a chord, like a triad of say C major, and I'm like, okay, well, in third or second inversion or whatever of that chord, it's too close. So then I have to go and try first, or try, and you just kind of find where are those sweet spots where there are lanes that you can stick in. And you can kind of switch lanes, but you have to choose when you switch lane. And usually it's like after they deliver the line, or when you change an instrument, or if you want to accentuate like a line and prep because they're going to pivot to some other emotional beat that they're going to hit, then you key off of that, and then you do it. But in this case, it's pretty much talking all the way through the whole scene. So it meant taking them on an emotional journey musically and harmonically from beginning to end.
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yeah. It's just very lovely, very lovely.
And also not giving away the pinnacle moments of the scene as well too, right?
Right.
You can't give away and telegraph too much before stuff happens, right?
Yeah, you gotta let them do it, right?
Let them do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was special. It was very. This is the kind of scene that Julie is just amazing at because, and this was remote, right? So I sang all the parts, and then she would kind of interpret my parts, and then we did a bit of back and forth to find the right timing. Because once you looked at the whole 4 minutes together, you start to get a sense of like, oh, there's too much singing in here. We need to get rid of these parts to create enough space so that when we do bring your voice back, it's warranted. There's a reason for it, and it makes sense. So that just requires some back and forth. Also, using her intuition also as a woman. Like obviously I'm not Aloy, I'm not a woman, so I don't know. There's a different we talk about EQ curves in audio or music. There's an emotional curve which is different too, right? Like
yeah, for sure.
You respond differently in different contexts, and so is a bit of triangulation there where I wrote what I felt was right for the scene in terms of like love and just kind of the timeless love and its timelessness, right? And it's
yeah.
And so I wrote from that place of like, okay, how can I be as authentic to a real deep well of love in somebody, and mirror the depth that love has, right? And all its complexities and its nuance, but ultimately it's just like it's a that's what I wrote from, and then Julie came in and kind of made it her own and kind of helped form it. I had the clay, I did the pot, but she came in and helped kind of like really smoothing out the edges and stuff.
Yeah. Ruin's Rise. I just loved this track so much. Oh, yeah? If I had to pick a favorite, I might pick this just because the percussion is so reckless in like a not in a rhythmic way, but just it's just very aggressive and kind of outbursty, and I really loved that. And just the high strings is Hardanger in here as well, maybe. And
this one has right off the top. It was basically we had a bunch of strings that were doing kind of these glissy harmonics.
And
the percussion is very it's kind of like it's kind of like that's pretty much
it's like, I mean, it just had any number of kind of outbursty emotions. And
it's also has a very it almost has like a battle tribal feel to it as well, right? Because it's like almost like a call to arms, I guess, in some ways, or preparing for the worst, but it's also very visceral, right? So which is a very interesting thing, because this one also has a tonic that's held for a long time, drone, and so the percussion basically is there to be like, it's almost like it's like what you would feel in your body as you're putting on your gear for war or for some, right?
Yes.
That's, I don't know, that's the vibe that I got, which is kind of like, it's very, it's not that it's unpredictable. It's that it's very like, it's getting ready to strike the coil, right? It's like, it's that moment. It's kind of like a Tesla coil, actually. It's like, you don't know when it's going to zap, but it's like, it's very like, it's ready to like, hit hard basically at any moment.
Yeah, and also the play with major and minor third too, right? You've got them both in there, which is really cool, especially when you've got tonic establishing tonic. So I liked that too.
It is also closer in many ways to, you think of like more melismatic kind of ancient scales. Indian scales or Arabic scales or other things, which are like um, you don't need harmony. You just
Right.
you have a melody and you have an
Mm-hmm.
eson, right? You have like
Mm-hmm.
a tonic, but even the eson can change. It's more modal, I guess, but not Western
Mm-hmm.
modal. It's more of a like I said, more ancient, I guess, in a
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels a bit more primal that way too,
Yeah.
in some ways. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's funny. That is your favorite one. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it surprised me too. I mean, I might say something different tomorrow, but I just got the biggest kick out of that one. I really enjoyed it. I think because initially I was so surprised by the first outburst of percussion, and I was like, "Oh, that's amazing!" And then as they happen, and they're just different, they're different, and yeah, I really loved that.
And
Um,
I love the transitions from minor to major, right? Like
yeah,
when you have a consistent tonic all the way through, um, you can just change things up to make it interesting, but they don't stray so far away from because you have a solid root, right?
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm,
but it's shifty, which is nice
yeah,
to work with as well.
yeah, loved it.
That's cool.
Well, I mean, we hit on all of them. I what more? What did I leave out? Like what are some of the Easter eggs, so to speak, or what are some of your moments that you'd like to highlight that I maybe didn't catch or something?
Well, there's not a lot more to add except that I'm I'm really proud of this one. Like I think I felt like because I took the time to get to know the game and the world of Aloy and Forbidden West and
Mm-hmm.
having studied Zero Dawn, I felt like this one it was a lot of fun to just be like, okay, well, how can not completely reinvent it, but like how can we
Yeah.
expand this world and the particularly those tracks that you're talking about with Melissa and then with Julie with the idea of home. Like I felt like there was because it was staged battle with the Horus creature,
Mm-hmm.
and we were doing um, just exploring sounds we hadn't explored. Like I I love writing very dense music and then paring it down. And most like my own personal stuff, like Bright Sanus or other projects and stuff, people get to hear a lot of the complexity that I can do, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still, uh, it's still, um, pleasurable to the ear. Like it's
Yeah.
not, it doesn't create a distance between you as a listener and as the person
Right.
creating the music. And I really enjoyed being able to explore a lot more depth of texture and harmony and melody. Not that I didn't do that in Forbidden West, but it felt like this was a more concentrated push where it was like, okay, there's a couple of key melodies that are here. There's a couple of key sounds that are very like specific to Burning Shores. And it felt like it could be very, I could go very big and wide with something like Titan's Wake, right?
Yep.
And and then pare it down to something very, very intimate and tight with just a single guitar and a voice, with
Yeah.
and so that range was really a lot of fun to work with because um at its core, it's still telling a simple narrative, a simple story. There's still a
Yes.
hero or a heroine, and she's still on a journey, and um, you know, the music is there to reflect that and be kind of the emotional friend during that journey. Um, and that was great because the Burning Shores theme was a canon that could just build and build and just felt good. It felt good
Yeah.
over. But then going to stuff like some of the other battle tracks, things that were more slithery, shifty, that kind of stuff. It reminded us that like, hey, the world isn't all lovely triads and happy-go-lucky stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's stuff that has shades of. There's lots of shades of gray and lots of darkness here. Um, and then when you get through that all, the story comes back to this is a human. We're all humans. Love is the most important thing. focus on the essentials, and everything else is just a nice to have, so that was nice musically to be able to explore that range from like makes you feel good, makes you feel uneasy, and then at the end of the day it's like, I can survive on just this breadcrumb. That's enough for me to go on. And so that kind of made that whole experience very enjoyable from beginning to end. It was just a really, I knew the world that I was writing for, and I could just get down to like writing something that felt really good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And just beautiful as always. It's just so much fun to hear your new stuff. So I loved it. It was a pleasure to listen to.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Emily, very much.